Yes, family, back again. So in my last post, I asked you if you remember a situation that he was in on Newsnight a few years ago. So I thought it was only right that I actually come and, do you know what I mean, bring the evidence, as it were, for those of us that may not remember or who didn't know at all. So this is a little piece, and this is actually by Owen Jones, yeah, and he was actually on the panel with Starkey on this said night. So let me just read it still, and you know what to do. You know what I mean? Comment at the end. Let's hear what I go on still. So it reads, Owen Jones, after Newsnight, David Starkey tries to rewrite history. Whatever David Starkey says, his Newsnight comments that the whites have become black were grossly inflammatory. He says, I'm in two minds about returning to Starkey-gate. The Tudor historian's comments on that episode of Newsnight were, from where I was sitting, so blatantly racially inflammatory that I was astonished that anyone would even attempt to defend him. Some did, largely by minimizing his racism, unlike the white supremacists who have since filled my inbox with hate-filled bile. You're a traitor to the white race, etc., etc. David Starkey also enjoys the attention. I was warned beforehand that he loves to provoke controversy for the sake of it. His love of publicity is clear in his first article since Dre Say Mitchell and I were ambushed with his ignorant bigotry in a BBC studio. He clearly relishes the fact that Ed Miliband joined the chorus of disgust at what he calls his low infamous opinions. But as a historian, Starkey must surely object to attempts to revise the past, and that's why his self-justification in the Telegraph piece needs a response. Starkey is outraged that Miliband slammed him for making racist comments, and then gives a few examples of what he said without mentioning the key offending lines. But even his selective quotes distort what he said. This sort of blackmail culture militates against education. Hold on a minute. Can he really get away with inserting gang into that sentence? A word he did not use at the time in the studio, and the inclusion of which completely transformed the meaning of what was said? Starkey may be a bigot, but he is not stupid. He must surely understand why Miliband and others accused him of racism on Newsnight. He argued that the whites have become black. Funnily enough, he makes no mention of this in his article, given we were discussing why people had become rioters and looters. This was a straightforward equation of being black and violent disorder. By becoming involved in August riots, the white participants had somehow become black. But in any case, as a historian, Starkey is aware that white people do not need to become black to become gangsters. The Cray brothers remain the country's most famous example. As for riots, they've taken place long before there were any significant numbers of non-white faces appeared on the British soil, and that includes the Tudor period that Starkey specialises in. If we're just going to talk about riots in the post-war period, Starkey is surely aware of the 1958 Notting Hill riots, when groups made up of mostly young white men attacked black residents. He further suggested that were you to listen to David Lammy, an archetypal successful black man, you would think he was white. Again, this led to an obvious interpretation. To sound respectable was to sound white. In his article, Starkey attempts a convoluted defense that the likes of Lammy and Diane Abbott have merged effortlessly into what continues to be a largely white elite, and in doing so had lost much of their credibility with blacks on the streets and in the ghettos. Of course, this raises other questions as to why Starkey thinks he's any authority on the attitude of black Britons towards prominent black politicians. But the bottom line is that none of this was mentioned in the studio. And of course, he began by suggesting a partial vindication of Enoch Powell's, a politician who had argued that mass immigration would bring violent chaos to Britain's streets. Powell was absolutely wrong about inner communal violence, Starkey conceded, but the implication was that immigration had indeed brought disorder to Britain's streets, but by the unforeseen means of black people colonising white people with their culture. It was a means of scapegoating black people for riots that had involved people of all races. Starkey's friends apparently unanimously believe quoting Powell was an error. That's an understatement. Putting the rivers of blood speech on the political agenda at a time when people were angry and scared in the post-riot aftermath was outright outrageous. Starkey lays the blame on gangster culture in his piece. If he had done that in the studio, he would have been wrong, but it would have been an argument at least worth debating. But he was talking about black people and black culture more broadly. His defenders have similarly misconstrued what he said. Toby Young argued he wasn't talking about black culture in general, but only a subculture associated with a small minority of people of African Caribbean heritage. Again, not what he said, and even Young was forced to admit he could have made this a little clearer. My one-time sparring partner, James Delingpole, seems to imply I helped set the whole thing up. It was a trap, he argued. We've heard that before. I had apparently decided to add black people to my list of oppressed groups to take perpetual umbrage and righteous rage on behalf of. The reality was, both Jada and I were taken unawares by a bigoted outburst and had no choice but to respond. Perhaps more bizarrely was Howard Jacobson's argument that I had taken part in a mugging. I was a babyface assassin, apparently, not a guest subjected to a series of outrageous comments who could barely get a word in edgeways. So I should probably clarify that I did not compel Starkey to make racist generalizations. Perhaps the only remote thought-provoking element of Starkey's Telegraph piece is the suggestion, with white working-class culture facing a systemic attack over several decades, the vacuum has been filled with values of gangster culture. But to Starkey, to even listen to hip-hop was to be part of a gangster culture. We know that there is a link between deprivation and gangs. It is not owning hip-hop CDs that drives gangsterism. We still need a debate about what caused these riots and about the growing numbers of young people who feel they have no future to put at risk. Not at least in a country where over 1 in 5 18 to 24-year-olds are out of work and education. But racist comments by the likes of Starkey have no role in that debate. And let's be clear, however Starkey and his allies twist what he said, his comments were racist. So let's not let the historian rewrite history. Okay? So this piece was actually, like I said, done by Owen Jones. Okay? And this was in 2011. Alright? 2011. Okay? So, yeah, well, just proving the point that it's not the first, second time, in fact, that he's made these kind of let's just call them mistakes for the sake of argument, you know? Yeah. So white people are becoming black chavs and all. Anyway, family, listen. I would appreciate what you think of that piece. Please leave a comment below. You know what I mean? See if we can have a little discussion within the comment section. Get a little bit more interactive. All right then. Take care. Have a nice day. One love.